Alright, are we ready for a little bit of dessert? All hail the night crew, or whatever crew you belong to. Let's just go with the sci-fi crew. A quick thank you to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Data Magnet, Cat Crab Lobster, Duck Machine, Try Again 95, Astray the Dreamer, Mezek, Budic Joel, German Chemist, Casper Arnholtz, and Chaos to Mist. Thank you very much. Anyways, on to the story. Class 10 Species Offender, Part 2. The chamber that he was in was fairly barren, but based on everything Wilfred had seen of the Union construction so far, he guessed that it was probably as good as it was going to get. The thing that confused him was that this room seemed more like a dentist's office than anything else, and the presence of some kind of spicy sauce that seemed more like salsa than anything else, alongside what appeared to be a vial of tea and a few other things that were probably edible, but didn't necessarily remind him of much, made him question just where he was and how he'd gotten here. He'd started out just like most spacers do when they come of age. He started hopping ships, doing odd jobs on whatever vessel he happened to be on, staying in stations when he had to, but mostly staying on the move. No particular rhyme or reason. It was just the way of life that he enjoyed. The thought of planetside life and settling down seemed almost repulsive. Everything he needed in life was in his knapsack or could be easily found. At some point, he ended up in a tram freighter doing long run to Union Station by the name of Hootburn. He'd never been to Union Space and figured it might be a good way to see Union Space. The trouble had come when he'd wanted to get off the freighter. According to the captain of the freighter, this wasn't something that was normally done. They usually just dropped their cargo, grabbed the next one due to go off to the usual route, and went. Actually, docking was, well, it wasn't unheard of, but docking for anything less than kicking someone off a ship or needing medical attention was practically unheard of. Wilfred had promised to the captain to be a nuisance if she didn't let him off the ship, so she docked for a few minutes it had taken to get him out of the airlock and through the connecting airlock before she undocked and made for the shipping queue. He figured from here he'd just wander around the station, maybe camp a bit somewhere unobtrusive, and then hop on the next vessel heading somewhere new. It wasn't that he was broke, or even poor, at least by Terran standards. It was more that he wasn't certain if Terran currency meant anything in the Union. Comparatively, they were pretty far away and so weren't exactly even minor trading partners for Terra. The next bit had gone wrong when he tried to enter the station from beyond the airlock. There was another airlock, but this one had a kind of display window with a Xeno of some sort looking him over. Name, species, identity code, and purpose of visit, and occupation, the Xeno intoned, Wilfred's translator aide suggesting that the Xeno was bored. Wilfred from Vonnegut. I don't know what my species code would be. We're not part of the Union, he started. The Xeno straightened at hearing this. Have you conducted a customs or hygienic sweep yet in the Union space? The Xeno asked pointedly. Well, no, but I took a bath before I got off the ship. He started again. The Xeno appeared to look him over, as one might removing a stone and finding an unexpectedly cheeky roach underneath it. The chamber hissed, and one of the doors opened. You will proceed into the next chamber for customs and hygienic sweep. Any actions taken against the sweep shall be counted against you in the event of a contraband is found, the Xeno said. Wilfred shrugged, grabbed his bulging knapsack, and moved into the next room. A tall but thin purpley Xeno was standing there, clearly waiting for him. The rest of the chamber was mostly bare except for a table and some kind of booth that he figured was whatever they used as a scanner. There were a few other Xenos around, but they didn't appear to be in any kind of uniform or anything to suggest that they were associated with the purpley Xeno. You will place your cargo here to be reviewed for contraband, the purpley Xeno said. Several of the other Xenos looked over at him, but seemed to not pay him much mind. He shrugged his bag onto the table and went to touch the zipper, but the Xeno stopped him. Step away from the table. Any actions you take further may be construed as an attempt to conceal contraband, the Xeno said, flatly. Look, man, it's just my gear, nothing special, he tried. Step away from the table, was a flat reply. Just be careful opening my bag. It's a little tricky since it's so full, he tried the warning. About a minute later, the Xeno was still struggling with the zipper. "Do you want a hand?" Wilfred asked. The Xeno looked up at him. The idiom clearly didn't translate as well as he thought it did. "I guess what I mean is, do you require one-time assistance in undoing the closure mechanism?" He tried spelling it out. The Xeno appeared to consider this, and then wordlessly gestured for him to do so, undoing an extra catch and pressing down on the bag to compress it just for a moment. He smoothly slid the zipper down and stepped back. The bag spilled its contents of clothing, various bits and bobs, and even a few jars of spice. The Xeno picked up one of the jars and shook it. The cap must be loose because it popped off and rolled away. The loose spice was aerosolized and in a loose cloud by his shaking and hit the Xeno in the face. One ear-piercing shriek from the Xeno later, and Wilfred watched as the purpley Xeno hurled the offending spice, which he now recognized as genuine Terran ground cinnamon, across the room, where it broke and spilled out across the wall, floor, and partially aerosolized. As a result of where it broke and spilled open, at least 2 other Xenos were hit by some of the cinnamon cloud and emitted shrieks of their own. It hadn't gotten any better from there. He'd been zapped with something that felt like tickling, but was clearly not intended to feel that way, based on how the Xenos were waving it at him. He'd been put through some basic questioning and the species info, including that hygienic scan that they seemed so concerned about. At some point, 2 big suits of power armor showed up. Nothing like Terran Collective Guard armor, but decently impressive all the same, even to Wilfred, who mostly ignored that kind of thing. After about a day of what passed for a day in Union Station, he got told that he'd been found guilty of various crimes and he was therefore sentenced to rehabilitation. When he'd asked what that meant, the Xeno telling him had just blinked and repeated the statement. It all seemed a bit weird to him, but he did have to know one thing. Could he get his bag back? The Xeno ended up leaving and came back to indicate that the bag had been declared evidence as part of the case against him and could not be released into his custody. He liked that bag too, and he had a lot of personal stuff in there. He couldn't remember the last time he synced it with the Terra network, hopefully before this trip out here at least, so he wouldn't lose everything. He wanted to try again, but these Xenos were a kind of weird system and was somehow already guilty of something. And what was even weirder, all the Xenos seemed scared of him. It was on the very verge of annoying. Then he had gotten put into some plastic cuffs of some sort and put on a ship with the 2 power armor suits. He tried talking to them, but they didn't seem to want to talk. It was boring, and if this was what the Union was, no wonder nobody wanted to deal with them. And now, here he was, in some sort of almost dentist's office with the most bizarre assortment of condiments that he'd figured must exist. But it was at least a decent place to bed down, and interestingly enough, it was quiet. Even the normal hum of the air systems was duller than usual. No matter, he laid down on the dentist chair, finding it a bit stiff, but rather comfy otherwise, and dozed off after a few minutes. Outside, the lead supervisor had just received another disturbing notice. Union priority channel to Draka Station rehabilitation. Terran Collective diplomatic envoy en route. Delay normal rehabilitation processing. End of chapter. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed.